All right. Hello, everybody. I hope everyone is doing well. This is the NBA Tournament Strategy Show, where we look at last night's slate. We look at today's nice 3-game slate and really just brainstorm guys we like, potential leverage plays, guys might go under on, things of that sort. And then, of course, on the pre-lock show for VIP members only, click the link in the description if you're interested. We go through the leverage plays, guys. We're going to be double the field on. That's what a leverage play is for me. Core plays, and then you can actually just see how I'm using the domination station on this slate. So let's look and talk about last night. Was not the best for me, at least. But we had some DFS Army members do well. My guy Spartan 2011 had a nice $80 into $1,200 kind of day. Congrats to you, man. And then we had a lot of other wins too. We had a decent amount of wins in the Discord as well. But I think for most of us, it was not a great slate. And the main reason for that, I had pretty much all of the Hornets and Spurs guys as core plays, so I had a lot of exposure to that. But I didn't have enough of these low-owned pieces like Malachi Branham. I am kind of banging my head against the wall here because Malachi Branham made so much sense. I kind of mentioned it on this show yesterday. I was like, Devontae Graham, I get it. I like him a lot. I understand why he's popping so much, but I was like, I refuse to let him be a core play. And so on the pre-lock show, we did that. We limited exposure, but I still had way too much. But Malachi Branham was right there, staring in our face. He was starting. We should have known. But made a ton of sense. Hate that I missed it. Zach LaVine was a leverage play. That went well. Vucevic did not go as well, but had exposure to both of them. So Chan just kind of popped into this 100K winning lineup out of nowhere. He didn't really do fantastic, but I guess he just kind of helped this lineup do its thing. Brandon Clark was a low-owned stud. You really needed Mikal Bridges. It's funny. On this show yesterday and on the pre-lock show, I was like, it would not surprise me if a random Nets guy goes off. I just didn't know which net it was going to be, and so I didn't want to take any wild guesses. But Mikal Bridges makes a lot of sense, and he might be the guy just kind of moving forward. We have to see how it actually plays out. So I'm not like setting it in stone, but Bridges has this could be a nice spot for him just kind of moving forward. So we'll see how things fall out after the All-Star break. Something important to talk about. This is the last show for about a week. So everyone enjoy the break. I know some people play the All-Star game in DFS. I do it sometimes if I just get really bored with like NASCAR and esports and PGA and stuff like that. So I don't know if I'll play that, but it doesn't matter. I'll see you guys for this show next Thursday. So yeah, overall, not a great night for me by any means, but it was nice to see some people win and have some success, but that didn't really impact me. For Kelly O, I don't think we had a lot of exposure to him. We were over the field on Jabari, but I did limit my exposure to him. So interesting 100K winning lineup on a gigantic slate. Could have been worse, but definitely not my favorite and or profitable slate by any means. Dave, agreed. I hope you're doing well. I'm doing well, man. You know, nice 3-game slate. It's a Thursday. Nice break after this. Can focus on some other sports a little bit. It'll be fun. But I already know I'm going to end up missing doing NBA DFS by the end of it. But I think this is a nice break point. Grayson, good to see you, man. Can you bridge the gap between winning and losing last night? I hope so. That's what I'm trying to do. I love these 3-game slates, and so hopefully we can find some hidden gems in it. Dave, you're right. Hit the like button. I really appreciate you, man. Hit the like button, share, and subscribe. Always appreciate the help and support from you guys, so thank you. Cincy, thanks, man. Well, thanks. I appreciate you joining a lot, honestly. Grayson, yeah. It's weird how sometimes I wish I would trust my gut a little bit more, but you know, it is what it is. Thomas Dye, good to see you, man. Michael Ortiz, yeah, last night was not my best night for sure. It was not super profitable, but definitely looking to turn that around. today. S. Scott, oh, thanks. Appreciate the support, y'all. Definitely do. All right, let's look at today's slate. Nice 3-game slate, like I said. There's some injury news here on this slate, but I think for the most part, we might have a relatively healthy slate, which is something we haven't seen in a while. I feel like we've been playing the super chalky value plays for a good chunk of time here. But let's start off with the Bucks against the Chicago Bulls. So the Bucks have Giannis listed as probable, so probably fine there. Pat Connaughton is still out. Jay Crowder's not going to come back until after the All-Star break, and then Bobby Portis is out. So we've seen some interesting things here with Chris Middleton and Joe Ingles kind of like swapping between who's going to be in the starting lineup and the other one playing more of like the 6-man role. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here. I would assume Chris Middleton starts here once again. As y'all can see, he's already projecting very well at his $5,500 price tag. He makes a lot of sense on this slate. Again, because of his ownership, not a guy that I'm like jumping up and down to play, but he makes sense. I get it. He's just really too cheap if his role continues to increase. The concern here is right before the All-Star break. If they wanted to rest him a little bit more just before the last game, that wouldn't surprise me at all. So something that I'm definitely thinking about as I'm doing lineups and construction from that perspective. But for the most part, as of like if we had to make lineups and it was locked right now, I would be fine eating the chalk, but I probably wouldn't want to be super over the field on him. For the Bulls, there are a few questionable tags. So we have DeMar DeRozan listed as TBD. So we'll see if he ends up playing or not. Derek Jones Jr. is listed as TBD, and Goran Dragic is listed as TBD. We know that if DeRozan's out, I'm going to be all over Vucevic. I know it didn't work out yesterday. You know, I have a little bit of a short-term memory, so it's a little bit easier for me to forget about how bad someone hurt me. But last night, I was very upset with him. But today, I forgive him. I forgive him. He's had a decent track record against the Bucks. The Bucks are a good defense, but Vucevic in particular has been a guy that's been able to have some ceiling performances against them. If DeRozan ends up playing, I'm still fine playing Vucevic. I would prefer for his ownership to fall a little bit more, so he's an easier leverage play. I don't have a lot of interest in Zach LaVine today, personally, just not my favorite kind of play. But we kind of really ran through the Bucks, and I didn't really talk about them. Giannis would not surprise me if he has the most raw points on this slate by the end of it. So I definitely want to have exposure to him, not someone I'm trying to fade. Honestly, similar story here across the board. The only guy who I can foresee me doing something special with is Brook Lopez. He's on my radar as a potential leverage play. Not my favorite spot, to be honest with y'all, but still viable, in my opinion. The Bulls aren't great against centers. They're ranked 17th right now over the last 10 games, so they're not awful, but definitely a spot we can't attack. The rest of this team, like these are solid defensive teams on both sides, so it's just hard to really feel great about picking on them. So Giannis is a guy I plan on definitely having exposure to, and then on the Bulls, definitely plan on forcing Vucevic if he's not showing up enough for me. Outside of that, Kobe White and AO did well yesterday. We had some AO exposure. The domination station liked Kobe White, so he showed up in a few of my lines just naturally, but I didn't have to force that. For me, that's just a situation that would be more interesting. Once again, if DeRozan ends up being out, if he plays, I don't have much interest in it. Again, it's a 3-game slate, so I'm not fading or Xing these guys out. But again, things that I'm just not going to force or change in the min and max exposure settings here in the DS. Everyone hates Chris. Good to see you, man. Austin said, we can't overlook Middleton anymore. Yeah, for sure. He's definitely he's a play that makes a ton of sense at this point. It's really his price tag. If he was price where he used to be like 7,500 or 8,500, things of that sort, he wouldn't be on our radar at all. But 5,500, you can't, at least in my opinion, you just can't completely write him off. Like I said, he's not a guy that I'm super excited to play, but he just makes sense. Austin said DeRozan was positive on MRI for a strain. They will rest him 100%. I hope so, man. I hope so. We don't have him in the DS right now. He's not in the sim model, but I don't really try to. I just wait until the people tell me he's not going to play and I react to it. So, all right, moving on. That game, as you can tell, not my favorite spot, depending on news. If DeRozan's out, then I'll have a ton of Bulls exposure, but I wait until we actually get the news. TT360 said, what do you think about Allen? Grayson Allen. If I ran the domination station right now, he would probably be around field weight exposure for me. So, like, because he's 3,900 in his 3-game slate, he's going to show up naturally. We don't have a lot of fantastic value on this slate if everyone ends up being healthy. So he is just kind of someone you have to play out of necessity for that reason. But he's not someone that I'm excited to play. He's just someone that I'll have to have in lines to make him work. Now, if DeRozan ends up being out and or some of the guys that we'll talk about in this Timberwolves game, then I'm a lot less interested in Allen, but I would still be okay with having some exposure because we would have some solid value from the Bulls in that case with their guards instead. That's just my opinion, though. All right. Moving on to the next game. We have the Timberwolves against the Wizards. For the Wizards, they are completely healthy, which is weird because Kyle Kuzma or somebody on this godforsaken team is typically questionable. So, for once, they're all looking pretty good. Per usual, the sim model likes Bradley Beal a good bit, so I'll have exposure to him for sure. I just don't know if I'll be over the field on him. I like Kyle Kuzma in this spot, but again, not enough to force it. Bradley Beal is really the main guy on my radar that I'm looking at forcing exposure to. Outside of that, I'll let the domination station do its thing unless it's getting too weird with some guys I don't trust. But Kyle Kuzma and Bradley Beal are my two favorite plays from this team, with Beal being a potential leverage play. Porzingis is fine. He's fine. He's just not a guy I personally like forcing exposure to unless I have a really good reason for it. So I would assume because of the 3-game slate, I'll have some exposure to him naturally, but not a guy I'm trying to force exposure to on this slate, especially if Rudy Gobert ends up playing. Speaking of, for the Timberwolves, we have Rudy Gobert listed as questionable once again, and Kyle Anderson listed as questionable. Some things never change, but hopefully they do after the All-Star break. Everyone and their mom loves Rudy Gobert today. That's not a shocking play. That's not a surprising play. And part of the reason for that is because he looked really good out there with Mike Conley. I don't know why I didn't think about this when Mike Conley was traded or moved to the Timberwolves. They played together on the Jazz. They have good chemistry. Rudy Gobert's usage rate increased previously when it was really just Conley and Gobert playing out there. So they have good chemistry. Solid matchup in general against the Wizards here lately. We've been playing bigs against the Wizards. They're not a bad defensive team. Well, they've slowly but surely gotten worse against bigs. But in general, where they struggle the most is just rebounding. So it kind of creates a nice situation where hopefully Rudy Gobert can get a solid double-double here in a soft matchup. And because of the recent trade of Mike Conley instead of D'Angelo Russell, his usage rate has already started to increase. Man, ownership is going to be tough today. Anthony Edwards, love him. I like Anthony Edwards a lot in this spot. Probably one of my favorite plays on the slate as of right now is Anthony Edwards. I don't want to forget about him. I'm trying my best to ignore his ownership and just have a crap ton is how I'm thinking about it as of right now. Jaden McDaniels is standing out a little bit from a projection standpoint. Sim model likes him a little bit too, so he's on my radar. Taurean Prince is also someone that I have kind of like a mental reminder to dig a little bit deeper into. He's really only in play if Kyle Anderson ends up being out in my mind. If Kyle Anderson doesn't play, Prince started last time out. So he definitely has he can definitely just run out there and do nothing. Like, that wouldn't surprise me. He does that every now and then. But at 3,200 at relatively low ownership, I am willing to take that chance. Um, it would be tougher if we get the news that Kyle Anderson won't play pre-lock, because his ownership will shoot up and it'll be hard to get leverage on wherever he falls. But if we don't get that Anderson news before lock, I'll probably have like a 30% min on him and just utilize him as a leverage play from that standpoint. So yeah, that can change. We'll know on the pre-lock show, hopefully, where things are going to fall from an injury news standpoint. But as of right now, I like this team a decent bit. Wizards were more boring. Timberwolves are more exciting. It's probably the best way of saying that. This game does have the highest total on the slate and still has a pretty nice close spread. So not a crazy surprise that I plan on having the most exposure to that game. For the Clippers, let's start off with them. The Clippers are pretty healthy. Only Norman Powell's out. There's still some new pieces from this team that we're trying to see how they all work together. But last time out, we saw Eric Gordon play around like 20 minutes, 21 minutes, and Bones Highland played roughly like 15, 16 minutes. So it looks like these guys at least saw some run, which was something that I had some concern about. I don't like picking on the Suns. They're a pretty good defense as of late. Let's see. I think gun to head, if I had to pick someone to play as a potential leverage play, it would probably be Paul George. Let's see what the sim model thinks about him. Yeah, sim model likes him a little bit. So Paul George is definitely on my radar. Kawhi, not as much, to be honest. But again, it's a 3-game slate, so I'll probably have some exposure. But again, for me, I let the domination station do its thing for the most part, and I focus on trying to find the lower owned, hard to say on a 3-game slate, but lower owned guys I want to go double the field on who have a potential for a ceiling performance. So Paul George is in that category of a guy that I'm considering going double the field on, which is a little scary, like going like 30, like 40% on a guy on a small slate like this, but I'm considering it. So we'll see what happens there. Outside of that, like I said, Kawhi will definitely be in some of my lineups. I'm just not forcing it. And then how did Zubac do last time out? I remember Plumlee had a decent game, but 28 minutes. Brutal. 28 minutes for Zubac in the last game where Plumlee was also playing for the first time. Plumlee only saw 17 minutes. That situation is hideous. That is a very, very ugly situation. I also don't like to pick on the Suns front court. They're pretty good defense there, so not the craziest thing. Since we're desperate for value, guys like Bones Highland is popping. Marcus Morris is popping a little bit. Again, if we get some crazy injury news, I am not excited to play this kind of chalk value, but it's a necessity thing at this point. We're desperate for value, so we're gonna have some ugly names and some ugly plays on a 3-gamer. Just kind of have to embrace the pain a little bit. Let's see. I missed some questions. Cedric, good to see you, man. JJ, hey, said who's going to pick up Powell's minutes? Gordon. Yeah, I mean that's part of the question. This is a new rotation going on. We've increased the projected minutes for Morris, Marcus Morris, Eric Gordon, Mann, and Highland. So we kind of spread out the love a little bit. So I'm honestly fine with all of them. But none of them, like I said, none of this value is value I love. It's just value out of necessity. And Powell being out makes it a little bit easier, but as you can see, it doesn't really move the needle too much from a projection standpoint with like Eric Gordon and crew. Is really just needing them to be very, very efficient with those minutes, which makes me not like Morris can definitely get there, but he's not my favorite out of this group of 4. We've seen Bones Highland be very efficient before in the past, Eric Gordon and Mann. To me, all 3 of them kind of fit into that profile of who can have a ceiling performance with limited minutes would be them. So I want to dig a little bit deeper into it, but it's hard just because we haven't seen the situation play out yet. So it's going to be a educated guessing situation of how you think the night goes, especially in a tough matchup. But again, I plan on having exposure to all four. And just due to ownership, it's really Gordon and Man who stand out to me the most. No, let's see what the sim model thinks. 4,700. Eric Gordon, Man. Okay, not a fan of Eric Gordon. It likes Terrence Mann a little bit. Who else? Who else? Morris and Highland. 4K and 37K. Highland. It likes Bones Highland a good bit. And Marcus Morris. Yeah, and Marcus Morris. So it seems like with that, typically I would just kind of get off of my little bit of interest in a low-owned Eric Gordon and focus on Highland, Morris, and Mann as potential ceiling options. But again, all of this could change a lot by the time we get to lock. So we'll know what we're actually doing on the pre-lock show. But these guys are interesting as of right now. Austin said, can Man be sneaky even though he kind of sucks? On small slates, Man is always viable. We've seen Man win people a lot of money before in the past on these small slates because he can suck just not enough to get you there. So he's definitely viable there. Also, I thought Man would have more, like 28 minutes. You would think. The problem is we really just don't know. With Eric Gordon joining the team and Bones Highland joining the team, it impacts Terrence Mann's minutes. So he's a little bit less consistent than he has been previously. Let's see how much. Last game he played 26 minutes. So it wouldn't shock me if he ends up falling somewhere between 23 and 28. I would wouldn't be crazy if we do end up changing this. Again, it's still really early, so all of this is subject to change. So it wouldn't surprise me if his fantasy points projection does end up increasing a little bit for that reason, like maybe a small boost of minutes to like closer to like 26, 28. I don't disagree with you there. But we'll see. We'll see. Yeah, so those are three guys that are on my radar. And then Paul George is pretty interesting. Don't really love the other pieces, but again, not trying to fade on a small game, on a small slate. For the Suns, we have Terrence Ross listed as available. That's interesting. Kevin Durant is still out. Cam Payne is out. Landry Shamet is out. It was interesting. I think everyone was kind of worried about, how will Basley and TJ Warren impact the Suns? Like, what will happen? But really, Basley didn't play. TJ Warren didn't see a lot of minutes. Okogie saw a crap ton of minutes on Tuesday. So it was an interesting performance. Devin Booker was a leverage play, but then we got the news that he was going to see limited minutes, so got off of that. But for me, the guy who really stands out here is Ayton. Unfortunately, the ownership is also already there, so not a sneaky play. But again, on these 3-game slates, you don't have to get too sneaky. As long as you're, like, for me personally, I like to have like my 1 or 2 weird calls. But for the rest of it, I'm fine just kind of eating chalk and hoping I have the right combination of players that I actually like and trust to some extent. But DeAndre Ayton's definitely on my radar. Again, the Clippers aren't a team I like to pick on, but Sim Model likes him. He has a ton of upside. As long as he's efficient, he can get there. Chris Paul had a big game out. Not trying to chase that personally. I am always considering Devin Booker as a potential option. The minutes limit, not really seeing more than 30 minutes. Well, technically 29 minutes is definitely worrisome. But I'm considering it. I know the sim model's not the biggest fan of him. No, it doesn't hate him. Just likes Anthony Edwards a lot more. Granted, I do too. But he's on my radar. If his ownership falls a little bit more, closer to 5%, I'll be open to doing like a 10% minimum. But 15 feels like a bit much on this slate. So just kind of considering it. And then we'll naturally get exposure to Okogie and Craig. I'm fine with them. Not guys I'm really trying to force exposure to either, but should totally fine just being around field weight on these guys. And for me, honestly, that's just kind of what this slate is in a nutshell. I'm going to have like my 4 to 5 leverage plays I want to go double the field on and really try to be special. But outside of that, I'm just going to let the DS do its thing and go from there. It's usually what I do on these small slates, and it's worked more often than it hasn't. So yeah, that's everything for me today, guys. I appreciate all of the support and just sticking around with me through this crazy season so far. I hope you all enjoy this All-Star break. Maybe dig into some other sports you haven't played before, like NHL, esports, NASCAR, if you're getting a little itchy. But outside of that, rest up, get the mental space right, positive for the rest of the season. Have a good one. Peace out. Bye.